Out of the four quotes that I got, and I'm going to cover how I got those, how I chose a particular tradesman further on in this video, but out of those four quotes that I got, the highest quote was triple.
Halfway.
Okay, no cap, not exaggerating, triple.
Oh, you motherfuckers.
Okay, the cost of the lowest quote. Now, this is where I give you a real interesting, mazy case study and a lesson in how to choose the right tradesman, because what I've learned, and I learned this before, but once again now, it is an absolute wild west minefield. Tradesmen, not all tradesmen are created equal. There's no regulations, there's no controls over what they do. You really got to know what you're doing, otherwise you could get seriously, and I mean seriously, you'll see as we go on in this video, ripped off and misled and just led up the garden path by some tradesmen. So first of all, what I did was I started with a mold specialist, because I'm like, okay, they've told me about the mold. The mold is what they can see on the walls. That is the most visible issue, because at that time when they told me about the issue, I didn't know that the root cause, as it would turn out to be, was penetrating damp. I was just fixated on mold. So I got a mold specialist, right? And as you can imagine, they are focused on mold, okay? So the mold specialist goes in. Well, actually, they didn't go in. They quoted me £1,000, right? That was their flat fee to go in, assess what the issue was, treat the mold. They were going to use some fancy chemical that they were going to spray into the atmosphere, and it attacks and kills the mold and prevents it from going back. And they put down this mesh and it prevents it from coming back, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, pretty impressive. Okay, that sounds really good. But then I went onto TikTok and I found this guy who I mentioned earlier who specializes in mold and damp. And I had a thought and I was like, what if the mold isn't just down to poor ventilation, right? What if it's down to damp? And I thought back to my property in Manchester where I had the issue of penetrating damp that I had to fix last year. So what I did is that I went on My Builder and Checkatrade, and I looked for builders that were tradesmen, but who happened to be builders that were specialists in penetrating damp. Okay, and as I've said on other videos, I covered this in my refurb video, my refurb of my property in Manchester. Watch that if you haven't. You really need to get, if there's nothing else you learn from this video, whatever you're doing, whether it's penetrating damp, whether it's doing a refurb, whether it's getting your roof fixed, changing your locks, always get multiple quotes. I would recommend at least 4 quotes. 4 quotes is what you need. And you're going to see there's a big reason why it's important in this particular case, right? And this is why I'm making this video on this particular experience that I've had. So let me just expand on that. Why do you need multiple quotes? Well, to understand whether you're getting ripped off or not, okay, I'm just going to put it plainly, to understand if you're getting ripped off or not, and to compare if they're quoting for the same works or something completely different. Because what you might find, most likely will, is that certain tradesmen might quote you for works that you don't need. So if you have multiple quotes and you get them to break it down by labour and materials, you can put them all side by side and be like, okay, these 3 are by and large quoting for the same works, the same stuff that needs doing, right? And if there's one on the end who's quoting for some random stuff, you can be like, well, I'm not sure about this one because it doesn't align with what 3 independent other tradesmen have quoted. And also you compare the prices, right? So get them to quote for, as I said, the labour and the materials. If they're all quoting for the same work and the same materials, those prices should be near enough the same. So if one tradesman is quoting, I don't know, £1,000 extra for the labour for the same work as the other 3, again, ask some questions like, why are you charging me more than these other 3? And that's how you can protect yourself to quite a large degree in this whole game of getting quotes from these cowboy tradesmen. They're not all cowboys, by the way, but there are some who are, right? So always get multiple quotes and always ask your tradesman to break down the quote by labour and materials so you can compare and contrast, okay? If they don't do that, if they don't want to break down their quote by labour and materials, don't go with them, guys. It's just not worth it. There's no reason why they shouldn't do that for you, okay? So let's talk about the quotes, right? Out of the 4 quotes that I got, and I'm going to cover how I got those, how I chose a particular tradesman further on in this video, but out of those 4 quotes, that I got the highest quote was triple. Okay, no cap, not exaggerating, triple.
Oh, you motherfuckers.
Okay, the cost of the lowest quote. And then the middle two, there was £500 and £1,000 between those two and the lowest quote, right? So you had three that were, you know, fairly close together, a maximum of £1,000 between them, and then the highest one was triple the cost of the lowest one. Absolute joke. And that's why you need a minimum of 4 quotes, because really and truly, right, with that highest quote, I got that quote back first, and guy was on the phone talking me through the quote. He was an older guy. He must have been in like his 50s or 60s. And, you know, when you're talking to older people, especially an old tradesman, they come across really, really knowledgeable, right? Like, they know their stuff. So he's just talking me through. He's like, you got to do this, you got to do that. And he was breaking it down. The knowledge, he was all in his head. I was just like, okay, so you clearly know what you're talking about. He's mentioning all this stuff. If I'd have just taken that first quote, right, I would have paid thousands of pounds more than I had to. I would have gotten extra work done that I didn't need to, all off of not doing a bit of extra legwork and getting a few more people through the door to look at the issue, right? So that's why you really do need to go for multiple quotes. And you might ask, well, why was that one triple the cost of the others? So he actually quoted, and I talked about this earlier on, I mentioned this earlier on, he quoted for some works that I absolutely, in his opinion, had to do to get the issue sorted. And here's a joke, right? He said, even if you get all of this done, there's still no guarantees that the issue will be fixed. And I'm just like, right. So what value I actually add in here? Like, why would I pay for all of this? And you're telling me at the end that there's actually no guarantees that it's actually going to be fixed. Okay. So for example, he told me that I had to get the whole of my loft insulated to eradicate the issue of damp and more of damp and condensation building up, and therefore mold in the house, right? And if you know, don't know if you had any experience with property, you know, I think even if you don't know property, a lot of people, or most people, know that getting your loft insulated is a spenny, expensive piece of work to do, right? So yes, it would have helped, okay, would have helped, but was it necessary for my particular issue of penetrating damp and mold? No, it wasn't. And to validate that, I asked each of the other 3 builders, 3 tradesmen who quoted also. And I said, right, I've had one tradesman who's quoted and said that I need to get the loft insulated. What do you think about that? They all pretty much laughed down the phone. One guy actually got angry. He was just like, you know, some of these tradesmen out here, you know, they're unethical. He was like angry that this guy had quoted me and advised me to do that. So these are the dark arts that you're dealing with, yeah, when it comes to dealing with tradesmen. So I'm going to say it one more time, just so I hammer home the message. Get multiple quotes from multiple tradesmen, get them to break it down by labour and cost of materials. Okay, now how did I find these tradesmen? So 2 of them I found myself, as I said, on MyBuilder and Checkertrade.com, and the other 2 were recommended to me by my lettings agent. So I actually tried to do it myself to begin with. I kind of got into a state of a little bit of, I wouldn't say panic, but I was concerned, yeah? Mold in your tenant's house, it's not a nice thought. And I was just aware, when they showed me the photos, I was like, crap, I need to deal with this quickly. So I just jumped on that site, My Nature. I kind of get straight to the solution and act, right? What I should have done is taken the issue to my letting agent first and be like, can you recommend a tradesman to deal with this? Why? Because, and you're gonna see why. Tradesmen recommended by lettings agents tend to be more reliable, more ethical, more professional, okay? And also, you might find that, you know, if you come with a certain issue, and you might have a certain tradesman in mind that you think needs to deal with a certain issue, and that might be you actually need this kind of tradesman, not the one you was thinking of first. So I would recommend always starting with tradesman recommendations from a letting agent. So the first guy that I found myself, I got him to go to the house. So overall, I got 4 different tradesmen to go to the house. First guy went to the house, and he basically called me within like a few hours of me posting the job on MyBuilder. And he was like, yeah, I'm keen to do it. I really want to sort out your problem. He was like really intentional. So I was like, yeah, I'm liking this. You're intentional. He goes out to the house. You know, he takes a bunch of pictures. He sends me a report in like PDF and he breaks it down by labour, by costs, by room, and what needs doing. I was just like, oh, this is pretty impressive. So at that stage, when I'd got that, before I'd, had the other tradesman go and see the property, I was genuinely, I'll be honest, I was thinking, like, I want to go with this guy. He's like, responds quickly. His manner is, pretty decent over the phone. He's intentional. He seems professional. But then that all changed when my tenant sent me a text. And she basically said that my neighbour wants to talk to me. And I'm like, why? So she's like, she just didn't want you to call you. She just wants you to call her about the tradesman that came and just talk through a few things. So I was like, yeah, cool. Let me give the neighbour a call. I was like, hi, I'm Warren. I own the property next door. You wanted to talk through a few things. So cut a long story short, she was just like, I'm not sure about the tradesman that you had come round and look at the your property and the work that needs to do. And I was just like, okay, yeah, tell me why. Let's talk through this. In my head, I'm like, what's it got to do with you? But the thing is, actually, it did have a lot to do with her, because to get access to the wall that had the penetrating damp on it, we actually had to go through her garden and through her house to actually get to the wall. So anyway, she says that, yeah, the guy came over and she basically told me straight. She was like, I didn't really feel comfortable with him. And I was just like, well, why not? So basically, he had to, he gave her a knock and he was asking her and also another neighbour just some, I think, what came across as weird questions. But obviously I wasn't there. So I can't judge, but I can only take her advice. But he was asking stuff like, what's in your shed? Is there anything of value in your shed? And I think the reason why he was asking that is because the shed backed up onto our wall. So there was about, a couple of inches gap between the wall and the shed. And there was moisture in between the shed and the wall. So I think in his head he was asking that because he was thinking, I might have to move the shed or take the shed down. And if there's anything of value in there, it could be an issue. I think, I'm being kind and assuming the best of him, and I think that's why I was asking. But if you're a neighbour and you don't really know, and this guy's just turned up and asked if he can come through your back garden and have a look at the wall, you don't know, and you don't even know he's coming, I can totally understand why that would be a bit unnerving. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. He was also apparently sitting on the wall, so he was kind of sitting on our wall that obviously backs onto the neighbour's wall, and she said he was just sitting there and just like surveying her garden and the neighbour's garden, so again would have come across a bit weird. And then the kicker is that he said to the neighbour, look, yeah, in order to do this, I'm going to need to put up scaffolding, and I'm doing the work, and I'm going to be starting in around about a few months. And he said the scaffolding will have to be up for 6 weeks. And there's a bit of work to do. I'm going to need access to your garden. And then apparently he wrote this all down on a note, by the way. And then and then at the end he put a smiley face and a kiss. And she told me all this on the phone. And I was just like, okay, I've given him the benefit of that up until now, but that is strange. I mean, as a professional, tell me what you think in the comments. That's a bit weird to do that, right? To say to anyone, regardless of whether it's the person you're doing the work for or their neighbours or other people that you got to deal with, to write them a note with a smiley face and a kiss. And, he basically assumed that he was doing the work. I hadn't said to him by then that he was doing the work. He was like, I'm coming back in a couple of months. I'm going to be up. And she also had children as well. So she was like, I don't really want a bunch of tradesmen in my garden with scaffolding up for 6 weeks whilst I've got children. And he comes across weird, so I don't want him around the kids. Blah, blah, blah. So I was just like, cool, do you know what? I won't go with him, okay? And it's at that stage when I rang the letting agent, got some recommendations from them. Another guy came in, and the work's done now, by the way. But he was like, no, I only need scaffolding up for 2 days max. He was more professional. He wasn't weird. And she was a lot more comfortable with him. So that's, I think, a first-hand case study, experiential story of why you probably want to get recommended tradesmen for big jobs like this. I think, you can go to My Builder or Second Shade for like minor stuff. So whether it's like, I don't know, fixing your white goods, your washing machines break down, or you need a plumber, fine. But for like maybe larger, more grander scale complex works like this, where they're going to have to interact with neighbours or your tenant as well, yeah, get a recommendation from a letting agent who uses trusted, reliable, normal, non-weird tradesmen. Thank you for watching. This year I'm making a video every month to answer any questions that you have for me. So whether you want to know whether you should invest in a limited company or in your own name, whether you should buy a flat or a house, what is the best way to get started in property, or who my barber is, just let me know. You can ask me in the comment section below, on Instagram, on TikTok, and I'll make a video dedicated to your questions. Like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.